Welcome back, and if you didn't find arrays boring enough, I got another collection type for you. It's known as a list. Now you might ask yourself, why do I need something other than an array? Array seems to work pretty well, I can do stuff with it, I can declare it, I can drag and drop items to it, and later on we'll learn how to populate it automatically. Alright, the difference between a list and an array, the primary difference, is that lists are what we call mutable. Mutable means in the middle of the program, in the middle of the game, at any time I want, I can add or remove or shuffle around the indexing of values of the list. Right, so the list is a type of collection that allows me to do a lot of flexible stuff with it, especially useful when you don't know how many items are going to be in that list. So if I need to add and subtract items at will from a collection, I use a list because it's very flexible for that, right? So if at any given time in the game something else pops up and I need to add it to a list, I can use list.add to add it. Now an array does not have that functionality. It always knows exactly how many spaces it's going to have in memory. And yes, it's true that you can change that dynamically in the editor, but you cannot change it at runtime. So I can't say let's add a value to this array at the end of the array. There are some ways to do it, but it's incredibly slow. You have to delete and rebuild the array, and it's a lot slower than just saying, hey, add a new value. And I don't know if I'm going to have that value or I'm not. So oftentimes when you have numbers that you're not sure the length of, if you have a set of numbers or a set of objects, and you don't know how many that's going to be, and it needs to change in the middle of the application or the middle of the game, then you want to use a list. If you know how many items are going to be in and it's a set amount, then arrays are a little faster and easier to use. Alright, so I'm just going to show you how we declared our lists. Now, first of all, one thing that's really important is we must have our system collections.generic. This is something that's not automatically imported with the standard Unity script that it generates for you. So we need to add that, and I'm just going to create a little bit of some comment here to say using this for lists. Okay, now this second one down here, we're going to get to that. That's another set of classes that makes iterating and create some functionality for lists that make life really easy when you're trying to do calculations and find the minimum and max. And we'll get to that in a little while. So using for flexible collection management. Okay, so here we have, and it's a very specific syntax to creating a list, so I'm showing you the two different ways we can create a list. The first one is to say public list, here's the type, and you'll recognize this from when we do find game components. We've done that before, like find component, we use this denotion or this syntax, which is basically telling us it's a type, right? It's a variable type, is a string. Right, so I'm creating a string list. Here's the name of it, called string underscore list. And I'm going to say new list, type of string. And then we've got this parentheses, and this is because this is actually a method. It's going to return a value back that's a list of string. So we just need to have it in that format in order for it to be correct. Now the second one is where we actually hard code values into this particular list, right? Now here's an interesting thing. We're going to put a little piece of code in here so I can show you how this add and subtract works. Alright, so string list values. Alright, so I'm going to say string list values dot add. Okay, now when I say add, it's going to say what am I going to add? And it has to be a string, right? So I've set this as a type, and arrays are the same way. We must have a solid type. We can't dynamically type it. So it has to know exactly what kind of type, and you have to click on add, and we have to add 5 or 4. Alright, so now I've created a method that's going to add this value at start. So now let's click on this. So you can see here's my two lists here, string list and string list values. So let's go ahead and click on play and see what happens. Boom, notice element 4, it added on the start of the game a new slot to my list, right? And it named it 4, or gave it the value of 4. Now you cannot do that with an array, and that's the thing most people think when they create arrays they can do that, but arrays don't allow you to just start appending values onto the end. Now let's just copy that. I'm going to put this in update, and let's just say string list dot add. But this is going to be, and let's say, we'll just use that, okay. String list dot add. Now this is going to happen in update, so it's going to happen pretty fast. So we're basically going to get a multitude of appended values, and they're all going to have the same value. Now we can make something fancy in here, where we could say like an int, which would be like 1, say, int val, and val, let's say val equals 4, and say val plus equals 1. And what's going to happen here is it's going to add the string value of this if it doesn't give me an error when it compiles. And it should constantly add a value, but it's going to add the string of the number. And you'll see real fast, yeah, it'll. Notice when I hit play, it started adding those values. Now, oddly enough, it added the value plus equals 1. And update shouldn't be this value here. So I don't know what happened with this. Let's just say 1. Now it should start adding those values. Yeah, there we go. I see it's just going to flow. Those values just going to keep adding those values, right? Now, likewise, like we can create it, we can also take it away, right? So I can say remove, and now we have all these removes. I can remove all of them at one point. I can remove a range from one index to another, or I can remove specifically 3. So it'll remove that value if it exists. Now let's hit play. One thing I forgot is going to keep adding those values. But look, it did remove. I forgot to take that code out there. It did remove our 3, right? So I have 0, 1, and 2. And once I stop the play, it'll go back to where it was originally. All right, so being able to add and remove values from an array, from a list or collection, that's something that can't be done in an array, and it can be done in a list. And this is why it's so important to have lists available to us when we need them. It's because a lot of times we need to dynamically size and add or remove objects from that collection.